Well, hello, Kelly.
Hi, Aubrey.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome back.
Welcome to our weekly digest.
Incorporating
Biblical truths into everyday life.
And what are we incorporating into our everyday life today, Aubrey?
So we're incorporating the action of faith.
Oh, yes, I like that. All that God asks of us to receive his grace, mercy, right, and have eternity with him is believe. That's why John 3:16 is one of the most known verses in the Bible. And it can be misconstrued, right, that works comes before faith, that you have to earn, right, you have to do something to earn your salvation, which is not true. But then there's also the misconception that all you need is to believe, and nothing really needs to happen after that. But actually, once we believe, we are called to so much more. And when we learn about God's ways, we are called to have a renewing of our spirit, of our mind, in likeness of who God is. Once we believe in Jesus, one of the first examples that comes to mind is the Great Commission, where we are called to share the good news of Christ.
Right.
That's like, and so if we were just to believe, then why would we have to share? Why would we have to tell people about Jesus?
Absolutely.
But once we believe, we all are called to more.
Yes.
So that's kind of what we're going to get into a little bit today, I think, right?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so James 2:15. So if a brother or sister is naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you says to them, "Depart in peace, be warmed, be filled," but you do nothing to give them the things who are needed for the body, what does that profit? It's not just empty words. Yeah, you're going to be fine, but you're not actually helping them? What is that, he says? You see that a man is justified by works and not by faith only. For the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. So we realize that can get complicated. Well, what do you mean? I thought we didn't have to do works. Well, sorry, but if you truly have faith, if the Spirit is within us, then there should be a representation of that. There should be a changing of the Spirit that actually shows the works of what he's looking for. Could be the Great Commission. It could be many other things, and we'll talk about some of those areas. But that there should be a faith. So there's some examples. For instance, Abraham, when he was called to bring up Isaac to sacrifice. Abraham didn't just, I have faith. He did the works of bringing up his son. He was going to do what he was going to do. There was a faith and there was works. He knew, because he said, "We will be back down from the mountain." Meaning he knew that God would either resurrect him or something would happen. He had a faith in that.
Well, for context, real quick, for Abraham, just in case anybody doesn't know the story.
Yes.
So Abraham was promised multitude of generations. So as numbered as the stars in the sky and grains of sand on the shore, so would his generations be. And he had to wait till he was so nice and aged to finally have his first son, Isaac. And then once Isaac
steeped in age.
Once Isaac was a bit older, God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac, which is what? But he had the faith that God had a good plan, not meant for evil, not meant for murder. He had the faith, and he did the works, right, of obeying and bringing Isaac to a sacrifice point. And when God saw that Abraham was willing, that his heart was so surrendered to God first, and that he worshiped the giver and not the gift.
Yes.
God provided a ram, and the ram was sacrificed, and of course Isaac was not taken.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's there's so many elements to that is going to blow your mind at some point in time. We'll touch on all
Abraham is in Genesis.
Yes.
And I wanted to circle back real quick, too, about when you said it's not by faith only. That doesn't mean it's not by faith at all. It means it's not by faith only.
Exactly.
I do just love that the two do go hand in hand. And, I think something I was reflecting on, it's hard to work on ourselves and to know that God is doing something, that there's a process. And it requires refining, exactly, and drawing closer to who God is and what he calls us to. It's so easy to forget and neglect. Our Christian journey does not just believe at the conception of receiving Jesus, right? But as we continue to walk day in and day out, the journey of believing in God is not just an intellectual belief. It's heart, soul, mind, and strength.
Absolutely. That is so good. So the parable of the talents, I believe it says that there was this man going on a journey and he had his servants, something like that. And he gives each of them an amount of talents, which is their currency at the time. One he gave 5, one he gave 2, and one he gave 1 talent. And the first one multiplied the talent to 10, from 5 to 10. Mm-hmm. The other one, 2 to 4. The other one had 1, just buried it in the ground. And so when the master came back, it's like, hey, what were you able to do with the talents? Yeah, what'd you do with those talents I gave you, huh? And the first one's like, whoa, listen, buddy, multiply that sucker twice the amount. Well done, good and faithful servant, the master says. You have been faithful with little, I will give you much. I'll give you more. Mm-hmm. The next one, 2 talents, again, doubled them. And the master was like, great job, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with little, I will give you much. The other one that had 1 talent was like, oh, I don't know. I buried that sucker. I heard that you were kind of a little rough around the edges. I was a little nervous about this whole situation. So I just kind of buried that sucker. And wow, that did not get a great response. That response was like, buddy, listen, you didn't do anything. You could have done something with that talent. You could have taken that talent and given it to somebody else and had them use it to multiply it. But you just buried that talent? No. Off you go. You're not even welcome here. You're off to, I believe it says outer darkness. So that's a little creepy. I think what that is saying the immensity, the intensity of what this parable is trying to say. So if we think about it, so many different elements here. So he's saying talents. Talents is the currency. So could be currency, or I like to think of it as the talents that God gives us. Each of us have our own God-given talents, right? And so if God's given us these talents, when we come to Christ and we're not using those talents for his kingdom to help others, whatever it might be, then that's not what God's looking for, right? He's basically saying if you're not going to use these talents, then off you go. Which is a little scary, but he's very blatant about it. And those who have their talents and they're using them, it doesn't matter if you have 5, it doesn't matter if you have 2, they each doubled whatever they had. One wasn't better than the other. Why do we know that? Because they both had the same response. Right. Good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with little, you'll have much. Both of them had the exact same response. So it doesn't matter what our talent is, as long as we're using it for the glory of God, as long as we're using those gifts. And I think that it's the harshness of not using it. I'm going to read it verbatim because it's kind of harsh, but I think that sometimes we try not to talk about the harsh words that God says because it just makes it a little bit sweeter for us and our ears to handle. But God's saying those who have ears to hear, not necessarily in this piece, but in the book, in the word, he wants us to hear his words. And he doesn't want us to sugarcoat any of it, right? We can't cherry pick what we want to hear from God to make ourselves feel better. That's not going to do the trick. And so Matthew 25:30, he's talking about the person who didn't use the talent that God had given him. And he said, and cast the worthless servant out into outer darkness. In that place, there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
And let alone kind of like the harshness of that verse that you were describing. Yeah. But we don't even want to acknowledge sometimes that there is a reality of heaven and hell. Yeah. And Jesus says in Matthew 7, 13 through 14, he says, enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few.
Yeah.
And so in this way, you know, it's more than just the faith that we carry, again, intellectually, right?
Yeah.
Belief in our mind of what we think.
Yeah.
But what are we doing with what God's given us, whether it be financially or just in our personality, the things that separate us from each other individually, that are gifts, right? That we can share and lend and, you know, shine God's light.
Yes.
So I mean, it's tough scripture, but again, the more that you read the totality of it, you know, you understand the heart and the, you know, the pure heart of God, but and also like he is a righteous judge. He's not, that's who he is. He's not going to stray away from that.
Right.
Matthew 25 goes on to say in verses 35 through 40 a great contrast between those who do something based on understanding of God and who he is and his character, versus those who don't. And I'll just read it. It says, "For I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me." And it goes on to say that the people asked, "Lord, when did we do this for you?" And he says, "When you do it for the least of my brothers and your brothers, you did it for me." And he goes on to curse those that did not. And he says to those on his left, "Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. For I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me no drink." And he goes on to say a similar list as the rest.
Wow.
And they will have the opposite. "Lord, when did we not do these things?" And, you know, when you didn't do it for your brothers and sisters, you didn't do it for me.
Right.
You know, we've mentioned on this channel before, like the call to love your neighbor, your brothers and sisters. And it's an active love.
Yes.
It's not purely an emotional
That's so good.
feeling, right? And so our belief, if we truly believe it says, "Love the Lord with your heart, soul, mind, and strength." And if you do, it encapsulates your whole being. And so with our whole selves, we're called into love, which can be emotional, can be a thought belief, but can also be in our body, carrying out actions and not squandering what God has given us.
Yeah.
Like Matthew 5:15 talks about, we don't hide our light under a basket or a bushel, but we put it on a lampstand for it to shine its light.
Yeah.
You know, so whatever it is that God has given us, right? Even if it's little,
Right.
those who he entrusts with little, right?
Right.
And steward it will be given more. One example for me personally that comes to mind, so I've grown up singing, and, you know, it's easy, so easy, too easy to say, well, my voice isn't this, or it's not that. And it's easy to second guess and psych yourself out and remove, you know, myself from certain opportunities musically, when in reality, that's a gift that God's given me. I take no ownership in the voice that I have, but I also know that I have to practice. I don't feel right when I don't practice singing, and when I keep myself from certain, you know, musical worship opportunities.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's going to be a blessing to others. I don't know if it's going to be a blessing to me. But at the end of the day, I'm singing to him.
Yes.
And that's enough. And it's better for me to put myself out there and try than to just say, well, I don't think that my voice is X, Y, Z, so I'm just not going to apply myself. It's
just
so
bury
tempting.
the talent in the sand.
Exactly. It's so tempting to do that. And that can be the case with anything individually for each of us, right? Whether it's, our time, our finances, our skills. You know, we also, as Christians, we also have shared calls, right? So loving the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, strength, loving our neighbor as ourselves, the rest of the commandments, other commandments, the Great Commission, which is just sharing the good news of Jesus. That's hard. That's hard sometimes. But it's a call. And it's something that we can do together, visiting people in prison, giving food to those that are hungry. Like those are also general calls that we're all called to. And so, yeah, whether the talents is a form of currency or if, we just can't help but relate talents to our gifts and talents that God's given. But I just love what you said, even when we started this video, of it's an active faith.
Yeah.
And it continues each day, a reliance on God.
Yes.
And when we're in communion with him, we see more clearly where he's directing us to apply our talents, right? And our efforts and energy, and to see the people around us that are in need.
Yeah, I love all of it. It's like, how great is our God? How great is our God?
Do you heart Jesus?
I heart Jesus. Do you heart Jesus, girl? So, yes, thank you so much for joining. And we get a little like, oh, we don't want to say it, but it's true. If you can hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, give us any comments, that helps. That is one talent that you can use to help spread the word of God, right? And so we really appreciate your time and your participation. Thank you. And we look forward to the next weekly digest. Bye.
Bye-bye.